Hey everybody, I'm going to do part 3 of the fantasy draft recap. Uh, I believe that we ended at Daniel Thomas going with the last pick in the 4th round. So to start the 5th round, Brandon Lloyd went first pick. Uh, Good pick for this part in the draft. One of the top receivers left as far as what they did last season. Um, My opinion, though, Brandon Lloyd is really not going to have the same kind of year. John Fox is going to run the ball a lot more in Denver, like I said about liking No. Moreno. Um, Kyle Orton really fell off towards the end of last year. They've been giving Tebow looks. I don't know, if or when he's going to start. I just feel like Brandon Lloyd really isn't going to have the same kind of year this year. Can be a good pick. I think he could go a little later. He went with the first pick in the 5th round. I see him more as a mid-6, early 7 range. Brandon Marshall went next. This was another guy that me and Kevin from Draft Sharks were right on par with. I was actually hoping he'd fall 3 more picks to me. I really like Brandon Marshall this year. Um, Different playbook in Miami. Uh, really going to put Marshall's skills to better use. He still had a good year last year, over 1,000 yards. Problem was he only had 3 touchdowns. Don't expect that again. Expect at least 7 to 8 touchdowns from Marshall this year, if not more, maybe some more yards. I really feel like he's going to have a big year with the new playbook they have in there. Definitely going to utilize him a lot more in the red zone. Dallas Clark went next. Good pick. There were a couple receivers left I probably would have taken over him. Um, but not a bad pick. Um, as far as tight ends, probably the best tight end left. Peyton loves throwing to him. He's a pretty much a receiver in a tight end's body. Always puts up a solid year, so it's a good pick. Colston went next. Colston went next rather. Um, 4th pick in the 5th round. Good pick. Uh, Colston has been solid since he came up. Breeze does a good job moving the ball around, spreading the ball around. He's a solid pick. He's going to put up his yearly average numbers and should be a solid receiver for you. Next, I was up with the 5th pick in round 5. I went with Marshawn Lynch. Um, I feel like I know he didn't have a great year last year. I feel like he'll have a better year this year. I feel like Tavares Jackson isn't your best option at quarterback, but they have some good receivers. They have, Mike Williams had a great year last year. Sidney Rice, he was injured last year, but he broke out a couple seasons ago. They have a pretty good offensive line in uh, Seattle. He's a good bruising back. They used him a lot better in the playoff game against the Saints, and we all saw what happened there. So I feel like they now know how to use him better. He's going to get his fair share of touchdowns. In the 5th round, I feel like he's a quality uh, number 2 running back. I was hoping to get Moreno. That's who my target was. He didn't fall to me, so I had to go with my backup plan. I'm hoping he'll have a decent year. Next, Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. Um, Hard to take a running back from the Patriots. I would have. There's a couple, not many. There was like 1 or 2 running backs left. I would have taken over him, but I mean, he did have a good year last year. He'll score his fair share of touchdowns. I just feel like they have so many running backs. They like stockpiled, and they're not great, but they're all decent. Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, Danny Woodhead. They drafted Shane Vereen. Stephen Ridley is having a great preseason. You just never know what's going on up there, but not a bad pick. Vernon Davis went next. Some tight ends are coming off the board, so not a terrible time to pick tight ends. You do want to get a top tight end, in my opinion, because the drop off isn't overly steep, but it's enough that you're going to want a top 5 tight end, top 7 probably. Especially in a 12-man draft, really, the top difference between a top 7 tight end and anything under that could be, 3-4 points a week. Stevie Johnson went next. Good pick. He had a good breakout year last year. 7th round pick really came on, surprised a lot of people. As long as Ryan Fitzpatrick can, keep playing all right and keep, getting that ball deep to Johnson, who's a bit of a burner, he should put up a solid season again. Jason Witten went next, and like I was saying, tight ends are coming off the board, so not a bad pick. I really like Witten this year. Romo loves Witten. He loved Austin and Witten are his big two, and I think Brian will have a even better year this year because they just have a lot of offensive firepower in Dallas. But Witten's a good pick. He's going to get his fair share of red zone targets. Should put up his yearly 1,000 yards, 7, 8 touchdowns. So we'll see what happens there. Mark Ingram went next. Decent pick. I think maybe a little early on the trigger for Ingram. The only problem I have with Ingram is, again, they throw so much in New Orleans, and not even that. And I know they drafted him in the first round. He'll probably be the starter. They'll probably use him more. But they have a few other guys they like. Pierre Thomas was the Super Bowl hero a couple years ago, and they still use him a bit. Chris Ivory is their speed guy. There's just a big rotation there. I feel like I don't know if Ingram's going to get enough bulk of the carries to be a big fantasy starter. Ryan Grant went next. Good pick. End of the 5th round, beginning of the 6th is where I usually have him going, and this is the end of the 5th. Green Bay throws the ball a lot. I think they threw towards the top. I think they're in the top 5 of passing to running ratio last year as far as pass heavy. James Starks broke out in the postseason. We'll see how much of this, the carrying load that they split. But a solid pick. Green Bay's passing game really opens up the defense, and they should be able to run pretty effectively with the couple of running backs they got now. C.J. Spiller went next. Not pretty, but a little early for Spiller in my opinion. He really didn't do much last year as a rookie. I still like Fred Jackson in Buffalo, to be honest. He's pretty consistent. He's a good running back. I would have taken Fred Jackson before I took C.J. Spiller, but if he can have that breakout year like people think he's capable of, then it might turn into a good pick. I think it's 1 year too early to be drafting him that high. I feel like Fred Jackson's still going to be the dominant running back in Buffalo. Santonio Holmes went next. Good pick. This is about where I have him going, beginning of the 6th to mid-6th. I would like him better if he had a better quarterback. Mark Sanchez has been good. He's not really a top throwing quarterback. They win by running the ball and playing defense. So Santonio Holmes is the number 1 target. But again, if he had Roethlisberger throwing to him like he did previously, I'd be more comfortable with it. But Sanchez has been improving. We'll see if he can make that leap. Ocho Cinco went next. That's who I would have picked before Santonio Holmes. Brady obviously is a great quarterback. Ocho Cinco obviously struggled a little bit last year, but they had a lot of problems in Cincy. Brady's obviously a much better quarterback than Palmer. New England tends to be much more effective in their playbook. I think Ocho Cinco will have a good year. I don't think as big as most people think, but he should have a good year. Manningham went next. Got a little run of wide receivers here. Solid pick. Not much to say. He's the number 2 wide receiver on his team, but Eli Manning does a pretty good job of spreading the ball. Should put up decent numbers. Matt Schaub went next. This is a pick. There's a couple guys I would have taken before Schaub. I know he's got a great offense. I feel like they're going to run the ball more with Foster. Now that if Tate stays healthy, I feel like they're going to have a good tandem back there. Obviously, it's not going to be a split carry tandem with how good Foster was last year. But Schaub's a solid quarterback if you wanted that top. He's in the 2nd tier in my opinion of quarterbacks. But if you were going for a high quarterback, it's a decent pick. Wes Welker went next. Solid pick. This isn't a PPR league, so there's a couple receivers I would have taken before Welker, but he's pretty consistently solid every year. Brady really loves him, so it's a solid pick. Stafford went next. I think Stafford's going to have a big year. Got good targets there. Obviously, Megatron, Calvin Johnson's a beast. Nate Burleson, I feel, is slightly underrated. He's a solid receiver, only underrated because really nobody ever says anything about the guy. But he's been pretty consistent in his career. Should have a decent year for Stafford. They have decent tight ends there in Detroit. They got a good young defense that should give their offense plenty of time on the field. Javid Best is good at catching balls out of the backfield. I think LaShore going down hurt Stafford's value a little bit, only because that takes a little bit of the threat away of the running game. Because Best is more of a, he's not really an every down back, but we'll see how that works out. Uh, Austin Collie went next. I'm sorry, I skipped a couple picks there. Rob Gronkowski went next with the 7th pick in the 6th round. Um, Solid pick. They also have Aaron Hernandez in New England, so that worries me a little. There's probably two, I would say two tight ends that I'm looking at that I would have taken before Gronkowski, but he got a lot of touchdowns last year. Brady really liked throwing to his tight ends. We'll see how that works out. Um, Eli Manning went next. This was my pick, the 8th pick in the 6th round. 6th or 7th round is usually when I take a quarterback. Looking at the quarterbacks that were left after Eli, I decided to jump on him. I can tell you that no quarterback went for 2 more rounds, so that shows you who's left. There are other quarterbacks I like, but I decided to jump on Manning to really secure that #1 quarterback for me. I feel like I filled out my skill positions enough to where I could afford to take a quarterback. He had 31 touchdowns last year, had 25 interceptions, but that's not as big of a deal in fantasy as it is in real life. I'll take the 31 touchdowns. Had 4,000 yards. So solid QB's got some good targets. So that's what I was thinking when I took him. We have Austin Collie went next. This is where Collie went. I like the pick if the guy can stop hitting his head. He's a great receiver. Manning loves him. I believe he had like 8 touchdowns last year before he got hurt. It was only like 9 or 10 games, I think. He's a very good pick. I think I usually have him at the end of 5, beginning of 6, because I really like him this year, as long as he can stay healthy again. So he went at the end of 6, so that's a good pick. Kenny Britt went next. That's another receiver I really like. Um, Pretty much anybody is a step up over Rusty Smith, who played a couple games at quarterback last year. I know not the majority, but Matt Hasselbeck is in Tennessee now, and while he's not, at this point in his career, he's not a great quarterback, he is still decent. He's not going to win you a Super Bowl or anything anymore, but he can play the quarterback position in the NFL still. Should do a good job getting the ball to Britt, who's pretty talented. We just have to see about Britt with the suspension possible, that type of stuff. But I feel like he's a good pick this year. Percy Harvin went next. And like I said in one of the earlier videos, this was Kevin from Draft Shark's pick. We were pretty much inside each other's head the entire draft, taking people that the other one wanted. Percy Harvin was who I was hoping to get in the next round. I really like him this year. I feel like Donovan McNabb is going to abuse him in the slot. Donovan McNabb loves just throwing short, throwing into the slot. He loves his tight end, so that could take. McNabb really force feeds the tight end. Shanko's still a decent tight end, but I feel like Harvin is really going to take that role, obviously not as a tight end, but just kind of that in the middle of the field type receiver in the slot. So I feel like that's who McNabb is going to rely heavily on this year. I feel like the Vikings are going to incorporate more screens and stuff, which is more of Harvin's game. So I really do like Harvin this year. I feel like there's a chance he could have 90 catches. I see him as a around 1,000 yards, 7 or 8 touchdowns kind of guy, which is if in the end of round 6, if you're getting him as your 3rd wide receiver, that's pretty good stats for your 3rd wide receiver. To finish off the 6th round, Anquan Boldin went. Not a big fan of Boldin this year. This isn't a bad pick because it's the end of the 6th round. So you're getting a quality receiver late. I just feel like he's not going to have the same kind of year that people think he's going to have. Looking at some of the film from last year, some of the replays, that type of stuff, he looks like he lost a little bit of a step. He's getting older now. They brought in Lee Evans as the burner. They have Torrey Smith, who's a future burner. Got to wait to see how they use him. Their game is still running the ball with Ray Rice and Ricky Williams now. They have a great defense. They really just love to keep the ball on the ground. Just not a big fan of Bolden this year, but again, he went in a decent slot in the draft, so it's not necessarily a bad pick. That's about all the time I have. I don't think I can fit another round in 20 seconds. So look for the next video tomorrow, part 4, and I'll do the next 2 rounds. Thanks.